Strictly Quantum, where we will talk about, well, not maybe strictly quantum, we will talk about everything but mainly liquid cooling. Here we have Joe Robbie. He's the lead design. What's your title now?
lead product designer.
Lead product designer. So he is in charge of most of the design being locked in as you can see it. But let's not waste time on introductions and stuff like that. We will start talking about all of the products that you have seen in the keynote, but first a few words of our sponsor. This video has been sponsored by Matrix 7. So we are back, and that was some content from our sponsor, and today we will be covering quite a few topics about the products that you see here, and then we will talk about the builds that you see in the back, and then we will talk about the products that you haven't seen in the keynote and we haven't revealed yet or mentioned it yet. So it's gonna be a fun night. I think we're gonna pull more than an hour, so we will also take a break somewhere in the middle that we can go to the toilet and stuff like that. So yeah, let's start talking about the CPU blocks. So when was it? November when we launched them?
Yep, the first Velocity for Alder Lake and the first block specialized for the Alder Lake CPUs came out in November. We followed that up with the AM4 launch, which just hit the web store, and LGA 1200 and AM5 are to follow. So the Velocity actually carried on a lot of the things we learned from Magnitude. They're in the same way as magnitude was specific to each socket. Also, the Velocity 2 is tailored to the CPUs which it fits precisely, so they all have a lathe turned cold plate that's, the radius needed for the specific platform they fit, not so much a general purpose block anymore. That actually means that the 1700 Velocity 2 will outperform a magnitude if you use it for Alder Lake. The mounting mechanism was brought inside the block, and we have exact mount backplates, which Attila just disassembled for you to see.
By demounting brought inside the block, we also mean that there are no visible screws from the front side of the CPU block at the moment. So everything is assembled from the back, the mounting is from the back, and if we get a top-down shot of this block here, you will probably see, no, we'll probably not see because there is plenty of RGB. Maybe from this side we will be able to see that the springs are, no, we'll also let me just dial down the RGB a bit. So the springs are inside the block itself, and when you tighten the screw on the backplate, this is being pulled out, and then that puts tension on the, yeah, we can see it right now, it's really nice. So there's the spring inside the block. Yeah, please continue while I'll do some more RGB here.
Yep, so one other big change that came with the second generation of Quantum products was the lighting. That was immediately obvious on the Velocity 2. So the acetal products and the Plexi products are now treated entirely differently, rather than having a big white part which kind of dilutes the stealthy acetal look. We have just a really fine illuminated stripe on the acetal versions, and we carried that over to the full nickel, and the newest addition to the finish is satin titanium. So because this is a solid brass part, it's the exact same finish that's applied to the torque fitting, so you get a perfect match there, and they really sit fantastically together in a system.
So we have the LGA 1700, we have the AM4. Obviously people are now talking about AM5 now that it's out in the public, and we can say that of course we will be ready when we need to be ready with the new block. And we have the LGA 1200 coming, right? Yeah. So any other topics that we can cover with the CPU blocks? They have a new cooling engine, right? There's the latest generation.
Yeah, and also as we go through the show, we'll elaborate a little bit more about Matrix 7, as we're seeing it in practically every second generation Quantum product, and we will be emphasizing it and displaying it on the website for you to all interpret when you browse the products. So CPU blocks and fittings will be added as compatible parts because they don't actually have a fixed position in the case. The CPU block would be, moving around depending on the exact location of the socket on your motherboard, and for that reason it won't line up every single time, but of course we have the offset fittings and all the tools in place to bring it on track. Now if you want it to line up every time, then the monoblocks are the things to look at, and that's what we'll be moving forwards to now.
What I like really about the new mounting is that you can now use tools to tighten the screws. So before everything had to be done by hand, and while you could do this, it was sometimes painful on your fingers, especially when you were at the end of the spring load. So that's a neat feature. I mean, you can, the magnitude has it on the front, but it's also very neatly concealed and hidden below the height of the frame. But if you had tools and screws from the front here, it would look ugly. So that's why it's cool that everything is from the back side. I guess that's everything about the Velocity 2. If we have some questions about the Velocity 2 now, it's time to
lots of people waiting for their Velocities. I guess AM4's on pre-order, they should be with you soon. Directly for velocity, I'm not seeing many questions, but everyone's anxious to get on.
Maybe we can mention that all 5 finishes have RGB in it, even the one with the bare copper cold plate. So previously we had a acetal CPU block which had no RGB in it. Now all of them have it, and if you don't like it, just don't use it. And one more neat feature about this block is that the acetal piece under which the RGB is mounted by these 2 screws. So if you want to replace your LED strips, you just unscrew these 2 screws here, and then this whole part comes off. But we have already did a video on this, which you can find on our channel. Matits made a nice presentation about the velocities. I'm gonna unplug some RGBs here so that we can move these blocks away, and we will start talking about GPU blocks. GPU blocks are also probably one of the most anticipated things, even though unfortunately GPUs are hard to come by these days. I guess liquid cooling them and extracting maximum performance now is more important than ever.
Someone asking for a non-RGB and everyone else saying, why would you not want RGB? I think now we have the best of both, in that when people were buying the non-RGB acetal product before, it was to get a completely black finish, so they didn't have the additional white piece. And now all versions have, full black left and right, so we'll be sticking to just RGB.
I guess that we can reflect on the new design and the RGB implementation when we get to the acetal GPU blocks. But let's kick it off with this one here. So the most upgrades that we have with the new product lineup is with the GPU blocks, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So the main thing that's changing now is that always before EK offered a GPU block, and then you can buy a backplate. Some other manufacturers are sticking to the bundle approach for quite a while now, where you can only have a GPU block with a black backplate which is included, and that's it. We are now also stepping into this direction where you can buy sets where you buy the GPU block and you will get a black backplate included with the water block right away. So each water block, each vector to water block that you buy will come with a black backplate. The backplates will now have captive screws, so these screws will be pre-mounted when you take the backplate out of the box. All of the backplate screws will already be installed on the backplate. So the rest of the screws that you find inside the box will clearly be to install the block onto the GPU. So this takes out the guesswork about which screw goes where. Is this screw too long? Is this too short? We had issues that we were supplying too much screws, and now I guess we will be taking care of this issue. So while each block will come with a black backplate, you will be able to purchase separately either a satin titanium or silver finish or a nickel finish backplate. So these will be the 2 choices. I'm gonna flip the block around and Joe will start talking more about the internals, the cooling engine. This is the Trio, right?
Yep. 2 things to catch up with from the chat. So since we picked the not including DRGB argument, one thing about all of the new products, from the mono block to the CPU block, the GPU block, and even the latest distribution plate, you can remove the LED strip entirely and take the cable off and have it a product without RGB, without disassembling the liquid seal of the block itself. So you can just remove the end piece as you put it together, or the aluminium cover on the distribution plate, and slide it out without affecting your warranty or the original leak-free warranty from EK.
Or you can just snip off the cable.
Or you can just snip it off. We also don't mind, and we'll give you a new RGB strip when you decide to unsnip it off.
Yeah. So this is the Trio. This is the for the wind block. Also, something that's changing is that we will not be applying any branding of the block onto the GPU block itself. Previously, we were printing the series of the block onto the stick out, but now we will just plainly mark them as vector 2. This will also speed up our production because believe it or not, we were sometimes waiting to print to be applied onto the right piece so that we can assemble the block. So we are changing things that we are faster with the production, and one more thing that makes faster the production is the standardized size, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's all part of the same thing. So the reason why we have the ability to put so much more elaborate lighting, the reason why we can offer such a wide range is that we've now standardized the widths. The primary reason and motivation to do it was so that they all fit together neatly with Matrix 7. For example, for the Win 3, the Strix, the Trio will all be exactly 21 millimeters wider than the reference and the XC3. So that means if you have them in a vertical bracket and it's in slot 2 to 7 with a Trio, and you know someone else building the same system with the same distro would have an RE, they can move it up one slot. That then takes out the 21 millimeters, and within slot 1 to 6 they'll have exactly the same port location, and it also works out in the horizontal plane that then you can use 21 millimeter extenders or offsets to make up the difference. So that standardization really had massive effects on what we can do with them.
Before we move along to the active backplate assembly set, let's talk about the cooling engine. We have improved the performance a bit, right? And we have achieved that by...
Yeah, so actually we got rid of the jet plate. It's not gone, but it's no longer two separate parts. In the past we were building blocks with various thicknesses of copper cold plate. So from Strix, for example, it was 6 millimeters up to 12 millimeters on the Founders Edition. Now every single Vector 2 will be 11 millimeters. That means they all have the terminal screwed to the copper, and they all needed to have an insert over the fins so that the fins aren't hugely tall, because 8 millimeter fins, then you just waste so much flow that it's not effective at the top edge. So they all have a plexi insert. It's a machined plexi insert. It actually has some three-dimensional geometry, so the inlet chamber tapers towards the bottom of the fin stack. That means we have better distribution of coolant, and since we were machining it so finely and accurately, we also included the contour from the jet plate, and that means there's no jet plate to assemble, no jet plate to fall out, and you can see the entire length of the fin, which is quite a nice look. So your jet plate's not missing when your Vector arrives, it's just see-through.
Yeah, it's plexi. One more thing about the design. So using a thicker copper now enables us to completely ditch the stainless steel covers, which we had on the Strixes for quite a long, and the Ford the Winds also had it.
Yeah, prior to the original Vector, there was lots of stainless steel bridge covers.
So now each Vector water block, as we can see in the future, maybe someone will do a crazy PCB where we will have to use a bridge plate, but the idea is that all of the blocks will have a single O-ring design. This will help during maintenance, so you don't have to clean more of the O-rings, check more of the O-rings, or replace more of the O-rings. There's only one there, and this also lowers the risk factor that there's only one O-ring to go bad. But seriously, have you ever had a O-ring bust on a GPU? So it's mostly just fittings that are problematic, but O-rings like this, I haven't heard ever in my life that any of them leaked. Should we talk about the terminal now, or we would talk about it later when we... Let's talk about it now. So this obviously isn't a AMD block, but it has a Radeon badge on it, and this is because we have these magnetic covers that we will show now, and then we will talk about them later again when we get to the active backplates. And let's go to the active backplate. So the 40 wins in the shop. The reference Vector 2 will be next week, early next week, and then we will have the Strix. Unfortunately, stock is somewhere is end of February when we will be shipping out these blocks. But the sooner you order them, that means that the sooner you will get it. That's how it works.
Yeah. One thing to clarify about the fitment of these. So the reference block, the RE, now also fits the Trinity. We extended the length just a little bit of the difference between a reference and a Trinity, so don't wait for the Trinity model, the reference also fits it. And then the XC3 will come along, which is extended even further, but otherwise physically very similar to the reference. Then we will have again a trio block that's compatible with the Supreme, the Strix, and for the Win 3.
There are still a lot of topics to talk about the GPU blocks. I just had one question which wasn't on the list, and then I take a look at the list and then I forgot it. But there's something also going on with the boxes and what's coming in the box, right?
Absolutely. So to bridge the gap between having no manual at all and having a full printed manual, we decided that we would include a one-to-one replica of the PCB that's printed. It actually doubles up as a piece of packaging for the block because they're assembled with a backplate and a block, either if it's in an active backplate or it's in a regular block. So in that gap, we'll put a print of the PCB itself, and on the print it has all of the screw sizes marked, the thermal pads marked, and if you have a different thickness for 3080 or 3090, it will be shown on there. You can cut your pads up and put them out on the paper. So
without even having your GPU disassembled, you can already prepare the pads to the right size. There's also the packaging itself will get better. We will include way more foam padding into the box. And the question that I wanted to ask, that's not on the menu, is that why did we update the GPU blocks without having any new GPU blocks on the market?
That's a really good question. So it goes back to the fact we would have loved to, when we had a new generation of GPUs incoming, to just revamp all the designs, but at the same time there was a huge time pressure with just a few weeks from seeing a PCB to them arriving on the shelves for us. So it's not the time to experiment with a new design, even though it's been relatively conservative. It's not radically different mechanically to our old block. Still, there's been problems that we've been working to perfect for months even now, and you'll be infuriated if we did that a year ago in August, that no blocks turn up until the next March. So now we have time that we can look through everything, make every adjustment a logical one. We've also seen all of the PCB designs, which makes a big difference. When we first bring a vector block, we've maybe seen one or two PCBs, and then we have to kind of adapt the design to stay true to it while accommodating all the new PCBs, their different components, their different layouts. Now we've seen them all. We can consider what happens, what the maximum copper thickness we need is, what the minimum we could put potentially is, where the terminal could be on all of them, and now we release them, we can unify so much more. So for all the blocks I mentioned so far, the terminal is in exactly the same location from left to right, the same distance from the I/O of the case, and that means
where we can do it.
Yeah, you can just swap in between any block. You have the same length tube.
As
Go straight in.
We can see here right now. So we have a trio, and we have a for the win active backplate one, and the ports are exactly on the same spot. So just to explain about Matrix 7 and about the width of the cards again, why did we do it like this? So you mentioned that the for the win is 21 millimeters shorter than the longer than the reference, right?
Yeah, that's in width. Yeah.
So that means that the terminal is somewhere about here, and the neat thing about this is that we have these offsets, and we will make the 21 millimeter offset and the 28 one as well, right?
Yeah.
So that this is the point that previously when we were making GPU blocks, we had, okay, we have the Strix is that wide, let's make it that wide. We had the tough is that wide, let's make it that wide. Now if the card is just 2 millimeters wider than the previous block, we will make it 7 millimeters wider, because that's the offset fittings that we have, so that you can make it perfectly parallel with your distro plate. So I hope that I have explained in a layman's term about how Matrix 7 works, and why have we locked in the width of certain blocks. This also helps us with the manufacturing of the end pieces, so we have only 3 of these end piece width,
yeah.
not like each block having its own piece at the end. That was the question that I had, and we talked about the boxes, and now we can move on to the active backplates, which are probably the most important things. I have took a peek at our sales when we launched the For the Win. I think that we've sold like multiple times more active backplates than the single-sided blocks, so that's telling something. Right, active backplates. The way that we are selling active backplates also changed in a drastic manner, just like the regular blocks. So the active backplate cooling with the block is now a single product in the web shop. So instead of buying the GPU block and then buying the active backplate, now you can buy the whole assembly, because it was designed as a single assembly. Yeah, you wanna hit it off?
Yep, and that also means as soon as the block's available, the active backplate's available in the shop. There won't be the delay before, like we decide, will we make an active backplate, won't we? Because we won't have to make a new end piece, a new terminal every time we decide to do it or not. Every 3090 or every card with VRAM on both sides we decide to support will get an active backplate as well. The other way in which they vary greatly from the previous generation is the fact they're now the same size as the block. Absolutely huge, and that in its we knew originally that the original active backplates wouldn't fit in every single motherboard. There's no ITX motherboard that any can fit in. No matter what clearance we made, there's just not space for a block there in the PCIe spec. So since most of them will have to go in vertically, and we made it a bit difficult for them to go in vertically with the arrangement of the fittings, and we saw lots of ingenious modifications to transform them into parallel terminal blocks that had the active backplate in parallel. One of the biggest changes to the active backplate is how that works.
Before we get to the terminal itself, so just like every regular block that you buy with a backplate, this one comes with a side plate. So this black piece between the two tops, the bottom and the top, is a side cover. The default piece will be black, but you will be able to purchase this piece in nickel plating or the silver one, which is equal to the satin titanium finish. Right, So Joe said that now the front side block and the back side block are a full-blown water blocks. They are the same size. Both front and back tops of the Plexi versions have a full-length RGB strip inside it. So as you can see, both blocks are equally illuminated. These strips are nested in this aluminum extrusion, so even though it's blasting towards you, you don't get nasty hotspots from the side. So they are on separate RGB cables now, so maybe you can even set them to different colors. And now we can talk about the terminal.
Yes, so the terminal itself, to enable us to integrate them in vertical mounts, that you don't have to have a port on one side, that you could put multiple active backplate blocks in the same system. We realized that, you know, there must be a way to have the same configuration as a conventional GPU block. To do that, we had to make the terminal in two pieces. So there's an internal piece that you can't see, and that gives a diagonal link across the terminal. So the pairs of ports on the left and right side are drilled all the way through.
I'm just gonna
just pull it apart. Yeah. Okay.
So we have one here without the brass insert, but this has a brass insert which makes it possible what Joe's talking about.
Yep. So you'll get to see it, and basically is what happens. The coolant comes in one side, and it could be from the top or the bottom, doesn't matter. And then there's just one hole through into the primary block. So it passes from the left to the right side of the primary block, of course, going all the way around it. Then there's a diagonal link back to the left side of the secondary block. And so when it's made its pass around that, it will end up on the right side of the terminal, and then it can again exit either from the bottom or the top. So you can have either a series configuration with 2 ports on the bottom, 2 ports on the top, 2 ports diagonally, the opposite diagonal, or you can put it in parallel with a CPU block maybe, or another set of an active backplate.
So here we have it. This is how it looks without the brass insert. Can we see it on the top down? Yeah, it's the top down. So this is how it looks without the brass insert. Here is how you install the side cover. It is actually screwed onto this acetal part, and then you see the brass part having the O-rings on itself rather than having the groove inside the backplate water block, and then the O-rings are now on the thicker cold plate, which is for the main block.
Yeah, so this also brings up another nice point in that when installing the assembly, so when you split the block in half and take the active backplate from the GPU block, the terminal stays with the backplate. And that means that the screws which are going into plastic, into acetal, which have quite a critical torque spec, they stay screwed in. There's no reason to take both sides off. So the terminal stays with the backplate, and then you know, when you come to put it together and assemble it with the GPU, you're screwing into the copper, and there's a much lower chance that something will get damaged.
So on the regular water blocks, which have the single-sided blocks, have the terminal on the copper. If we come to the active backplate, again the main block is screwed onto the copper, and the active backplate terminal side is on the Plexi or on the acetal. And like Joe said, there's no reason to touch these top screws, and then you will be just torquing the screws in the copper part, and everything will be just fine.
Yeah, and then of course there's the third product which comes for the 3080-90s, and that is an active backplate on its own. So an upgrade kit that has everything you need to turn the base block into the active backplate set. So if you decide to purchase it that way, upgrade later, you still can. You don't have to replace the primary side block, but of course in doing that you'll need to have 2 terminals, 2 end pieces, double the lighting parts. So
before I forget, we have a trio here, and the interesting thing about the trio is that the before we plug in the RGB for this acetal one, let's make some darkness here. So the trio has the power connectors far back inside the PCB, and when you have a nice backplate like this, obviously the backplate covers the latches for the power cable. So what we have done is we are including a small plastic, how do you call it?
a spludger.
Spludger.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Is the technical term, but
yeah.
that's,
a spludger which you can slide into these small grooves here, which would perfectly just unlatch the power cable, and you can pull them out one by one. So we have learned from some of the mistakes that we've done with previous products, and just we are trying to make them better and better. I think for the grand finale for the GPU blocks, we have talked about the magnetic covers. So if you like Radeon more, you can be a Radeon guy. We might also do different kinds of these covers and different shades. This is now all of the doors are like open to making different styles of these covers. If you have any specific wishes, like all black ones without any branding, let us know and we'll see what we can do about it. And now let's talk about the RGB implementation in the acetal versions of the blocks.
somebody noticed about the dual biases, so we try where we can to make a very discrete hole that you could,
Like here.
yeah, just like that you could just toggle between with the right tool. If you know where it is, you could just gently nudge it across, but we don't want to make a massive opening to fit your finger in, otherwise it ruins the point of our side cover. There's a finger-shaped hole for you.
Yeah. So like we said, that we are trying to make all of the acetal products as stealth as possible, and they are all black, but some people still like to have some RGB. So the RGB is implemented in a very thin light guide, which actually goes all around the block on both sides. So if you have the product inside your PC, you will be getting this nice even line of light around the whole GPU block. And if you simply don't like RGB, just have it like that and you have a small discrete line there. That's, I guess, it about the blocks. We have talked about the launch dates. After the Strix we will have the trio at one point, and what else do we have?
XC3 will also come, and the Trinity is covered by the reference, so
Trinity covered by the
that's
reference. Trio equals for the Supreme as well, because these are the most exciting GPU blocks on the market at the moment. And if we are done with let me check my list. L-shaped backplates. So yeah, the L-shaped backplates actually touch the side of the GPU block copper plate, right? So this flange touches somewhere over here.
yeah,
right?
yeah. There's a space where they come together, and if desired, you could paste it so you have some substantial
Hybrid
transfer
cooling,
between the two parts. There's a clearance there to do it, but just be delicate with where you throw paste around the plexi.
This is not in the manual. This is not something that's like
You must do it. It's not a necessity, but
it like boils down to the point that even though the screw holes are tiny, there are still some tolerances. So if you are assembling your GPU and your backplate, you might end up with a contact or with a gap. So you would have to experiment of making the perfect fit and then applying paste between the backplate and the block itself. The monoblocks.
Absolutely.
Hand me some monoblocks. This one you have already seen, and this one you haven't seen yet. So let's talk about the looks. So everything now is boxy. We have just accepted this boxy design, so the CPU blocks, the GPU blocks, and the monoblocks as well are being square as they possibly can be. This is the X570i for the Strix. This is already available in the web shop, and what's special about this one is that we have to assemble half of the board.
What's special is it's an absolutely tiny motherboard stacked with different PCBs. So at the bottom edge you have the chipset on the bottom. Then originally it had an aluminium heatsink with a fan. And above that, the sound audio PCB with an M2 drive on it. That's covered by the original M2 heatsink, which has all the branding. And on the left side, the I/O cover joined up with another piece of VRM heatsink that had, again, another tiny fan inside. So we didn't want to leave you with any tiny fans, and all of that stuff got replaced either by block or aluminium. The block covers the entire VRM and extends down underneath the audio PCB to the chipset. Then we put standoffs on the top of the block so that you can put the audio PCB back on it, then your M2 drive, then stack back on the original M2 heatsink on the top of the board, so all of the Asus branding remains. It looks as original as it can, as true to the original board design as it can be, and the rest is completely filled with the monoblock.
Talking about the monoblock itself, all of the monoblocks are using the exact same mounting system as the CPU blocks, right?
Yeah, so as practically everything that was in the Velocity 2 got carried over to the Momentum, that was intentionally because in the past we were using a standard platform for monoblocks, so it wasn't inherently socket specific. Obviously it was different for Threadripper than for the mainstream sockets, but still they all had the same cold plate. Now they get the curved cold plate from the Velocity. One other thing to note is that for the Velocities to meet the Matrix 7 standard and for them to always clear the Intel spec while being full size, the steel base plate on the bottom is at a fixed height, which means they all have the exact same mounting springs, mounting pins inside, whether they fit AM4, 1700, 1200, they're all the same. And we will also use those on the monoblock. So it was essentially a complete platform design that shares a lot of parts between them all, and that means we can, without making a million individual components, still tailor the monoblocks to be CPU specific as well.
Interesting part about the design itself. So we have bragged about the CPU block that there are no visible screws from the front side, and we have carried that over to the monoblocks as well. So if you take a look at this Z690 Maximus Hero monoblock, which is coming soon, TM, you can see that there are absolutely no screws from the front. Everything's mounted from the back side. Even the VRM cooling copper parts are from the back side. It is mounted with the same exact mount back plate. Again, if you want to replace your LED strip, it's also done with the same two screw design that you can remove the entire cover without having to disassemble the entire block. Talking about complex motherboard designs that are making our lives harder when we are making monoblocks are the I/O shrouds.
I mean, it wouldn't be harder for us, but it will be a lot harder for you when half your motherboard is gone, because when the VRM heatsink comes out, when the meaningful cooling parts come out, now the rest of the motherboard comes out. You know, lighting parts come out, the I/O shield comes out, and the top half of the motherboard is completely blank. So for the Extreme, which had a really beautiful I/O cover to begin with, we made a replacement part so that you can fit the monoblock, put our I/O cover back in place, and everything gets covered up exactly the same. It looks neat, and you retain the character of the motherboard, so you still know what you've got. It doesn't completely abstract it, but it does look much cleaner.
So what Joe is talking about is that this piece here, this big black piece, is machined by us, made by us. So this is a huge chunk of aluminum, which is carrying on the same design elements from the chipset heatsink onto this part, so that it keeps the natural look of the motherboard as you would have it when you have it with the original parts. This is the Crosshair 8 Extreme, right? Guess we can wrap it up with the monoblocks here. Did we say everything?
Yeah, I saw a few monoblock related things pop up in the chat. Someone was asking for Z690i Strix. That's on the plan. That will be coming very soon. One of the next ones we pick up after the Hero is replaced, for sure.
Yeah.
So also someone
I forgot something.
What'd you forget?
I forgot something.
Oh, we're going way back. Aha. Yeah, so we guess we should talk about Matrix 7 in monoblocks.
Yeah.
As you remember, when we were wrapping up Velocity, we said, you know, Velocity is a compatible element of Matrix 7, and only parts which are truly grounded in the case, that can only fit in one specific place relative to the ATX or the PCIe specifications, form the foundation elements for Matrix 7. And that means when you put two foundation elements together, when you stack a Momentum 2 against a Vector 2, magic things suddenly happen that were previously impossible. So, as we mentioned earlier, every single Vector 2 GPU block we've designed so far has the ports in the terminal on exactly the same spot, and so does every Momentum, which means when you lay them together, you have one straight tube run from the terminal to the block.
So even if you don't have a distro plate in your case, or you are having a case for which we don't make a distro plate, the GPU terminal's left port will line up with the bottom in port of the Momentum monoblock.
Yep. Not that I expect this wizardry will be able to continue forever. That, you know, for unforeseen reason, there won't be space for a port on that exact line if we suddenly have RAM on both sides of the socket again, or, you know, a crazy stacked sideways M2 drive there. But we will move it by an increment of 7, you know, so a 14mm offset, a 28mm offset on either way brings it all back in line. So anything that is fixed in place, we can deal with it, and then make the parts which make it friendly for the unfixed parts like CPU blocks.
Next in line is something that we don't have here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's vertical bracket.
So I hope my line of conversation is on point enough to see us through without the product.
Yeah.
But as you can imagine, when the GPU block, when the Vector 2 is in the slot, we know exactly where it is relative to the PCIe spec, and very conveniently the PCIe slots are practically exactly 21mm apart, almost. So, you know, every time you move it down a slot, we know where it is. It makes sense with the distro, it makes sense with the extenders, but if you flip it to be vertical, then it's in uncontrolled space, and if you used any vertical GPU bracket, we wouldn't know exactly where it was going to end up. which is why we've made specifically for Matrix 7 and for the active backplates a new PCIe 4 bracket, which will sit in the exact spot such that the tube to the inlet of the GPU block remains in exactly the same place, whether it was vertical or horizontal. So if you imagine they were both there at the same time,
So like this,
and you had
or like this.
exactly, if you
It
installed a
would stay.
90-degree fitting on this or on the horizontal one,
It would be here.
the center point of the tube stays exactly there. So this magic bracket, which is actually finished and in our office across the street,
And it's also in that build right there.
and in the build, which
Yeah.
we'll get to later, you know, it sets it in exactly the right place. Honestly, it's not a magic place, but that's the spot for us.
Yeah. So I guess I'm gonna reflect back on the active backplates again and the terminal. So before, like you said, it was not possible even to fit active backplates because they would be so close to the motherboard in a vertical setup, and the ports were in on one side, out on the other side, and if you wanted to reverse the flow, you would have to flip the terminal. And now with this one, you can have both in and out on the same side, or on the back side, or diagonal, which we will show in the build which we have in the background there, so that you see that this new terminal actually helps you a lot with flexibility. We have done the bracket, and we'll just probably the most exciting, the radiators, right?
Yeah, so this is really a special piece because it is the product line which I wouldn't say inspired Matrix 7, but you know, radiators are such a long-lasting part that we'll need to have in our portfolio for years. As you can see, the fact that we still had the Coolstream PEs until now, we expect these will be around for 5 years, just because the nature of what it takes to put together.
There's only one sad thing about them.
There's a sad thing now.
No RGB in them.
Is it? Oh, it's not.
Oh.
Oh.
We sincerely apologize for not putting any RGB in the radiators, but I guess we will fix that with some fans. Continue.
So because you know, we knew this overhaul of radiators would be one that stayed with us for a while, not just for a year, not just for one generation of GPUs or one generation of CPUs, but you know, until they get entirely replaced and cases change and no one uses fans anymore, they will be around. So when we were setting the dimensions, this, you know, became a topic. Can we do something more with it? We were prepared at that point to retool and remanufacture every single radiator, internally and externally. It's not just like a facelift. It's not a new shroud. Everything is different.
Even the supplier.
Yeah, every single internal part. So this is a big step. And when we were looking to how we would configure them, how we would lay out the dimensions, then we got to thinking, okay, well, if this is in regular increments and we can use extender fittings, then this will make sense with distribution plates. And then we didn't stop. So that went on to the GPU blocks, to the motherboard blocks, to the CPU blocks, through everything. And this kind of midlife refresh of Quantum, moving to Quantum 2, gave us the chance to look at it all.
We've shown these radiators half a year ago when we had our expo for Computex. Now we are at CES time, and we can say that the physical samples, these are like now 99% final versions of these radiators. This is how they will look when they will arrive at your doorstep, and we can say that we haven't stepped away from the render design a single bit.
Yep, to the exact millimeter, everything stayed the same as when we rendered it. The only thing that we've chosen since the last time is the exact FBI spec for each one. So we tested out multiple options for them all, and landed on what makes sense.
If you've seen some banged up fins on these radiators, we apologize, but we have been dragging them along here for 3 days. We had media meetings one-on-one with some of the most relevant medias there, and also who wanted to have a meeting, so we might have banged up a few fins. But here we have the S360 in white and white and black version, and something that you have asked for were all black versions. So we are also going to do all black versions, but only in
S240, S360, P240 and P360. But we will also bring along replacement parts for the others.
Yep.
So the aluminium extrusions will be modular, that you can interchange them for the same colors as torque fittings, and then the possibilities are endless. If you need to make a very specific size, I don't know, an X560M match perfectly with an all black P240, you will be able to, but we won't make an infinite number of combinations for ourselves. And for the biggest part of the portfolio, we think the modularity is more important than absolute blackness.
Regarding the end caps, our initial idea was to anodize these end pieces into red, green, blue, yellow, purple, and all of the colors that we are offering for the fitting rings, the fitting locking rings, the magnitude frames, is that you can change these. That's why we went with silver end caps, because they also pop up a little bit. But here I have a radiator which is half disassembled. I have already removed the 2-port fittings which make the connection inside the radiator, and I have removed the 4 screws from each end. So if you unscrew all of the screws and the parts, disassembling the radiator comes down to a few simple steps of just sliding the end pieces off, this one as well, and then it looks like this. I can say that we are really proud of this new design because it's simple and it's also very rigid. I can say this is like miles beyond the radiator that we currently have, and these are the pieces which will be available in different
and thanks to the modularity of the design, the fact that we revisited every single size all at once, we won't have too many different versions. There will obviously be SP and X end pieces for 120 and 140 width, so 6 different physical sizes to cover every radiator in the portfolio is pretty good going. If we tried that now, we'd end up with millions.
I guess this is something that will be also appreciated by modders and advanced people who will still want to paint their own radiators. This is really next level assembly and also disassembly, so that you can quickly get it apart and then just paint it and put it back together without scratching the paint when you're putting it back together. So those who have disassembled our previous radiators to paint them, they know exactly what we are talking about. But let's go back to the portfolio and talk about the sizes.
Yeah, so we will have 3 thicknesses again, SP and X. Unsurprisingly, that came from SEP and XE. But one big difference now is that they will all be available in 120 or 140 sizes. Not every single one, because an X140 single is just impossibly obscure, and if we had a white one, maybe we would sell 5.
2.
Probably for him.
Yeah.
So we don't have every single one, but the ones which moved in a good number, and everything that we have in black, we also have in white.
Something that we don't have here as samples are the crossflow versions, but the crossflow versions will also be arriving at the same time. Actually, we were told that it should be end of February when the new radiators will be hitting the shelves. So keep your eyes peeled. But let's go back to the features. So the S is the only version which comes with 2 ports only, no multi-port versions, but you'll have the crossflows in Slim, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
crossflows will be in the double and triple sizes.
Coming back to the P and the X, and the performance has greatly increased on the S. The P has massively improved, while the X has the least advancement in performance.
Yeah,
because it was already quite good.
The overall dimensions of the X remain exactly the same as the XE, so it previously was 58 and it still is 58 millimeters overall. The internal layout changed a little, but it was the recipe that was so successful on the XE that inspired the tweaks for the PE, or for the P should I say. Consequently, the P, which has now gone from 38 to 44 millimeters, is right on the heels of the X, and for most fan speeds in single fan configurations, you won't tell them apart.
Yeah. So if you want the best performance, you get the XE with push-pull. Such fat radiators are begging for more airflow, so make sure to get a push-pull. But let's talk about the number of ports. So we said that the P and the X are multi-port. This will probably be out of focus on the top-down camera because it's so tall, but the P and the X have a port and the end to bleed air, and both of them have multiple ports on the other end. So I'm just gonna lay it down so that we have a nicer shot of this from the side camera. And if you want to replace these ports, you would just unscrew the cover, which is the fitting, which is
an extender fitting essentially,
fitting,
which drops inside. You must use an extender if you have a big fitting, because they won't fit inside the aluminium of the radiator, but with the Torque Micro perhaps it would still go inside. If you were stuck for space with an S, you could fit a micro fitting actually in the extrusion and really take the instant. We'll come back to those.
We will try that later. But one more use of these side ports is what might happen is with distro plates, right?
Yeah. So again, we're choosing the port location for the next few years. We didn't see the sense in throwing ports absolutely everywhere, but one place they will probably come in handy is on the end. So for the P and the X, you'll notice that they're at exactly the same height. When you lay them flat side by side, they stand up in just the same place. They're also the same width apart on every model, including 120 and 140, which means on these two exact locations we can fit, well, 24 different models of radiator when you include every length, every width, every thickness. And that means, you know, a distro plate with 2 drilled holes and with 2 fittings, not, 4 tubes or bent tubes, no rotaries, no
fittings, dual rotaries.
Nothing to screw together. You can just push the distribution plate onto the radiator or vice versa, and you made a really good high pressure seal instantly.
Yep. Radiators, any questions? I think we covered everything, and 480 versions, yes?
Absolutely, there will be a 480 and a 560 version of every thickness. So quads for all, triples and duals for all. We just won't have the single fan in every single model, so that will stop at P120. There won't be a P140, X120, X140. That's practically all that's missing from the 2 and 5 port models. From the crossflows, which are all 4 ports on the S, and they're 4 ports which you don't have to use diagonally, so they're in exactly the same place, and you can use the ports on the same side of the radiator, no problem, no performance difference. And on the thicker models, on the P and on the X, where they were a multi-port, you'll have 8 ports to choose from.
If the radiators were exciting This is something else.
I think, I mean, I hope everything about the radiators you saw coming, you saw it in the visuals. It's a physical thing and you can imagine how it works. Now you can imagine the performance. Now we've given you some insight. But the fans, however, a lot of details you couldn't see in the renders.
Yeah. Cables or the engine? Let's talk about the engine. So the under the hub is a magnetic levitation bearing, which means that you will have to use it on PWM power source, so it should get 12 volts all the time, and the speed is regulated by the PWM signal and not by the voltage, so you will not be able to undervolt it. That's one thing. Replaceable rubber corners will also be a thing, I mean are already a thing. So these rubber damper corners will be available in all of the colors that we have currently for the Vardar Extreme fans: red, green, blue, yellow, purple, orange, white, black. That's it. This is the EK Quantum phase fan. So we have a high performance fan version. This is still carrying the signature Vardar fan blade geometry, but we have reduced the gap between the frame and the blade tip to increase performance. Very sleek and sexy aluminum covers on both the front and the back side of the motor hubs. And I've done everything except the cables, and now we're coming to the cables themselves, right?
Yeah, so the cables are a big change from previous fans and a big change from practically any other fan. We've seen daisy chain connectors on the X3M, but they were still on the end of a huge 400mm cable. For these fans, we came up with a male-female daisy chain system that interconnects every single fan. So no matter which fan you choose, whether it's DRGB, whether it's an all-black version, or if it's the white one, or the other fans which will come to the EK range, they all have the same 8-pin connector. This is not in the interests of being proprietary and blocking anything. Every fan is supplied with an adapter back from the 8-pin to standard 4-pin DRGB and standard 4-pin fan, 4-pin digital RGB, so only 3 pins in there. The connectors that we're using are actually the Molex 2.5 microfit, so the fine pitch as used by the Founders Edition cards. That's extremely high current rating, so we can have just one series of wiring for the entire system. So 20, 40 fans, not a problem, and perhaps also some pumps, because one notable thing about this connection is that all 8 pins are connected. So if you had a black fan between 2 DRGB fans, the subsequent DRGB fans would still receive the signal. And there are also 2 PWM channels in the same wire. So if you had fans and pumps all connected together in the same series, even multiple pumps, then the pumps would receive one PWM signal and the fans would receive the other. So all of your fans can operate according to a coolant temperature curve, and you can keep the pump driven at a constant RPM, or multiple pumps driven, and the wire itself is a high enough current rating to handle it all.
So these cables are exactly as long as the fan itself. We have already received comments about this cable being too long on the side, but we have did this on purpose, because if you have a small case, or you have the fan mounting spots all the way to the wall of the case or something like that, you will be able to lift the cables up against the side of the fans, and you will still be able to mount them in any possible spot. As Joe mentioned, every one of these fans will be delivered with a standard cable which then goes to a PWM source and a RGB source. We will be making many types of cables. So you will have a cable which will have the power input also from a Molex. I know people hate Molex, but if you want to run the whole 40 fans and the pump from one header, you have to use the Molex. We will also make a SATA probably, but we will specifically highlight that with this cable you are able to have only so many fans and pumps on the same header. Y splitters also, so that if you have the fans in push-pull, that you can just link them together right away. And if you will express the wish for some special cables, just let us know and we will consider manufacturing them.
Yep. Again, in the chat following that, it's proprietary connector. Absolutely not. From the perspective of modders, it's a standard and available connection. It's a known series of Molex connectors. So if you want to play with it, tweak it, they're out there in that perspective, and every fan adapts back to standard cables. You're not locked to buying them in packs of 3 to get the adapter, or
I guess
any other such.
I guess the point is that that the NVIDIA spec plugs are something new that only happened a few years ago, and that people are not so accustomed to, while the current 24-pin, 8-pin and things like that have been around for a decade. Or
no,
they've always been around.
They've always been around. We've just not seen them applied in
yeah.
our industry until now. But we felt that was the most appropriate connector. Has a really high current rating. The latch is really comforting to have. That your RGB cables won't fall apart. It's snap together.
This is a very important thing about the RGB cables, because you had to tape them together in order to make sure that it won't fall apart, or you could have done like Lian Li had to physically lock the fans onto each other. But if you are using the standard RGB plug, that's just destined to unhook unless you tape it together. But
I think as soon as you put one radiator into a case, you will love it.
Yeah,
because it's instantly, I don't have 8 wires anymore, I have 1.
Yep. So we said that we don't have any RGB for the radiators, but hope this will make people happier. The other fan that you saw is the impulse fan, which will also have the same cabling. This is a really early production sample, so that just we can show it off. It's also a bit banged up because it's dragging inside R&D and everything, but we still decided to show it a bit. So 6 months ago, when we had our expo, we said that we will make 2 fans. One is for really high performance, and the other that's focusing on RGB. That's because if you put LEDs in the frame, that means that the blade has to be smaller. That means that you're losing performance, and this for some people is okay. They would trade performance for more RGB. The RGB on this impulse fan is not the way it will look on the final product. It's a bit pale, but it's a good representation of the 2 fans when you compare them to each other, and how does the RGB implementation look like. So more RGB in the frame and the blade, while the high performance fan will have only RGBs under the motor hub.
Yep, I think that there's really something for everyone there. If an efficient fan is important to you, then the phase remains true to the Vada philosophy of really the best all-rounder for a radiator setup. But knowing that it's liquid cooling, that you have radiators, and if you just push the surface area, the efficiency is less important, then lighting becomes the most important thing, and for that there's the impulse fan.
Did we mention the fan speed for the phase? It's gonna be from 500, right, to 250 or less?
From 550 to 2200 for the phase.
Yeah, so it's something very similar as the Vardar that we have it at this moment, so no major changes there. Obviously the magnetic levitation bearing will impact the reliability on a different scale, and we were aware of the issues with the Vardar fans, and that's the reason why we went into the lookup for a new supplier to really be competitive or be at the top at fans on the market. That's it about the fans. We're gonna talk about the distribution plate, right?
Yep, the last product before our intermission. We'll take a look at this, and I think there's been lots and lots of questions about distribution plates in the chat.
Okay.
So yes, first things first, distribution plates will get an upgrade for Matrix 7. The port layouts are tweaked for everything from the first generation, and what that means is now there's no confusion between will the ports be horizontal or vertical for the CPU block, for the velocity or for the momentum too. They're always vertical now. The outlet's always on top, since that bleeds the best. The GPU port layout is now structured around the new terminal system. We have a default set of ports that you could use with no extenders for slot 1, slot 2 and slot 3 on ATX size case distribution plates. 3 coming from below, so you can have the inlet on the bottom side of the graphics card, and 3 pairs from above. So the 3 top pairs come into play when you will use a vertical bracket, since there the tubes are in line, and we'll see it in the system later. And also the top pair could be used if you had the card lower down and you needed to use extenders to bring it up, or if you had an array of multiple GPUs that were connected in parallel, then the lower ports there make sense. Moving around further, we get on to the radiators. Here now there's just one port location finally, so with the original reflections the port location was tied to one specific radiator model, and either the PE fit nicely or the SE fit nicely. Now we can put the ports high enough that every radiator would fit if there's space in the case. So you can use the X with a 90 straight up directly into the distro, or a P with a 14mm extender, or an S with a 28mm extender. Also, one other change to radiators is we will try, where possible, to add the option of secondary and tertiary radiators with a little pass-through route. You add an additional 28mm extender and move where the return from the final component is. That would put the coolant into a little bypass route and give you another pair of ports for an additional radiator. We'll use that configuration on the XL and the Evo. Unsurprisingly, they'll be coming along the first, but that's not the end for the reflections. We do intend to offer for the Fractal XL cases a dedicated distro this time. Our original Fractal distro was made for the R6 and coincidentally fit the 7 and 7XL and Meshifies. This time we'll make it dedicated to the XL, so we can have a much more convenient radiator layout.
We already got into some questions, so like, are the old reflection distro plates Matrix 7 compatible? And I can say no, and you will explain why exactly.
Yep, so with the previous version, all of the port spacings were based around the most common component that someone would want to put in that, because they weren't all the same. The spacing between the ports on an SE versus a PE was different, and versus an XE and there was no common height difference that we could just add an extender to make it fit directly.
We also had the issue about if someone's using a CPU block or a monoblock, you would ultimately screw up the port, so you could make it compatible only with a velocity CPU block, and also in most cases you would have to disassemble it, rotate it, and then it would work neatly. So this is why the old distro plates are not Matrix 7 compatible, because the foundations of the Matrix and how does it work weren't available then. So these distro plates which we are talking about came 2 years ago, right?
Right, yeah.
So it's a long way back. The first mainstream and most successful, one of the most successful distro plates that we did was in collaboration with Lee and Lee, was the G1, and that one required you to flip the block sideways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one thing to consider, is that the distribution plates, like the active backplates, were a first generation product for us. No one had really offered them, you know, in full production volume ever before. They, you know, were hugely successful, but brought with them lots of challenges. And also, you know, one hurt the other. When the active backplate came along, then it's almost impossible to fit with some distribution plates.
But now it is.
And now we've managed to consider everything that's out there today, a little bit forward thinking, and considered what might come in the next generations. So hopefully this one will stick for a bit longer. It's a much more mature product.
I see Noctua, and I just interested in if someone wrote again that we have copied the Noctua fan blade. So someone wrote somewhere that we have copied the Noctua fan blade design, and sorry to say that the Water fan was launched 5 years ago, 6.
Yeah.
6. So sorry, we not copied it. It's very similar, but if you talk to Noctua, they were also accused of copying the Gentle Typhoon, and they have went into very deep details about explaining why they haven't copied it, and it takes a lot of engineering to design a fan blade geometry and also to fine tune it. So about copying things, yes, things sometimes look a bit similar, but saying that they are copied
it's generally that they're both optimized for the exact same scenario. You know, most fans either
happens to be the same.
Most fans either look the way they look because it was a visual choice, or because that's the right way to make it. You know, for that RPM range, for that restriction.
Talking about the distros, getting back to the distros, the changes. So the aluminum shroud which hides the LEDs is now smaller, so that we can have the ports more nearer to the edge. And if you take a look at it, this is the internal side. The screws were before from the internal side, and now they are all from the external side, right? And there's no more steel plate.
Yeah, so they've been completely turned inside out in the same way that monoblocks and Velocity has, that they're now all screwed from behind. The same is true of the reflections. That means on the inside you get a completely clean surface. If you have a little drip of coolant, it's not running past the screw. It's, you know, easy to wipe off on the inside. Otherwise, visually, they're a little bit more blocky, a little bit more detailed in the placement of screws and the placement of the badge, and they do what they need to do. They fit into place, and they form probably the most critical Matrix 7 foundation element of the system.
Yep, just like we said it in our keynote, which aired 4 days ago now? When was it?
Wednesday. Yeah,
Wednesday, yeah. We say that the distro plate is basically the heart of the Matrix 7 system, and if you missed our press release, no more Molex. So all of the new pumps, so like the complete stock of EK products which are using a pump are now with a black non-sleeved cable, with a SATA power plug, and the regular PWM signal cable. This makes it much harder to sleeve it because you can't unpin it, but since it's black, I reckon that there's no general need to sleeve it.
Yeah, I mean, as a modder, I would cut it off no matter what was on the end to make it the perfect length for me, and put the direct pin to the power supply. One thing to note with the new wire, it's a slightly different gauge than the old one, so make sure that you crimp it tightly. Don't treat it like an ATX cable if you put an ATX crimp on it, but use a probably 20 to 24 gauge size crimp and push it together, and then you'll have a good reliable fit.
So there you have it. Pro tip for crimping. Are we gonna take the break now? By taking the break, I guess that we will talk about random things for 5 minutes and not liquid cooling, and then we will get back to the builds. We are giving you a break so that you can stretch your legs, go get some drinks, coffee, tea, whatever you prefer at this moment. Here in Slovenia now it's 9 p.m. Somewhere in the US is now 9 o'clock in the morning or something like that.
That's right, it's not 12 hours away.
It's less?
Yes.
So it's 7 in the morning.
You should be fully alert though.
So good morning. Can someone have a countdown for 5 minutes? Let me check. So now it's okay. So 5 minutes. So CES. New stuff. AM4. I guess the AM5. AMD stepping away from the pins and doing LGA. That's I guess something that's good, because people were ripping out their CPUs from their sockets quite often.
Yeah, I think that's the only blunder I've made installing a CPU, is just getting it stuck on the cooler every time and then trying to push it back in without opening the latch.
I guess everyone expected Intel to show some GPUs, but that haven't changed yet. The Nvidia announced that the 3090 Ti, of course, we will be compatible with it. You will get the notification when that time arrives. One more thing that we will show later is the 3070 Founders Ti, right?
Yeah, we have the first sample here, so we can show that.
We'll do that. We have the countdown timer. Thank you very much. We can also talk about cars. So how is your car, Joe?
It was 420 then, and someone asked if we will have 420 radiators, and of course we will.
No, we will have 420.
I remember.
Any interesting questions? Any none?
Well, it's 2:30 in the majority of America where people are.
Okay.
I have a few 1:30, so they're completely awake and not sleepy after lunchtime.
Reflection XL and Evo. Reflection XL is the one that you saw, and the Evo is coming soon. TM.
3090 Ti. Who's gonna get it? Well, someone. We're surprised. It seems like nothing's in stock, but GPU blocks are flying away whenever we put them on the shelf. So they're somewhere. Just more people want them than
Let me just take this
any retailer can keep
away. Should I also do a little bit of teaser for the people so that they stay here until the end? So we will talk about this more in the end. Bye bye. Bye bye. So that's a little bit of teaser while you do your duties.
Do we play games? I play Farming Simulator, which is the best game.
I haven't played games in a long while, but when we had the Mike from MSI visiting, we've agreed that we will play some Quake Live and we will whoop their asses.
I won't. I'll just mow fields and cultivate.
So I guess it will be time for me to install the Quake Live, do some practice, and just whoop their asses a bit.
Many people asking about RAM water blocks, and yes, that's something that will come back and we'll revisit with the second generation quantum stuff, but
Only it will come back in style.
but it's not exactly the number one to resolve right now. But yeah, and also we need to figure out how to make it work with Matrix 7.
Oh,
Yeah.
we have some ideas.
Yeah.
We have some ideas. 2 more minutes to go. Any
A few questions relating to the Founders Edition and 1390 Ti. So the Founders 3090 Ti, I don't know exactly what will happen because their 3090 is different to the 3080 and the 3080 Ti. But for the majority of the custom boards, we expect that the current blocks will be ready to support the TIs as well. I guess another good question from that would be if we will support the Founders Edition with Vector 2s. Possibly. We'll consider it if there will be enough of them out there, if they still move fast enough for us to do it. The Founders, again, it's a bit difficult because it's custom for each size. It's not like the one block fits all or fits 3 or 4 solution for the custom boards, but it's multiple individual products for us to do it. So possibly, but again, the PCBs are so unique that they really deserve the unique design block they got to.
Yep. 46 seconds, 45 seconds. Nice day. He's from Spain? I don't know. I never knew how do you pronounce it. Teacher, but I have been following him for years, and he's always doing very nice work. And I guess he's doing some SI work, assembling really nice PCs for customers. So thanks for joining in and thanks for supporting us.
Reflection to ETA, time to get it to the shop. We will probably bring it just slightly ahead of the radiators. But
We are back, and
we are back.
And the text is a bit off.
We're almost on the screen. We are B.
Yeah, we are B. So we are back. So everyone who took a small break, welcome back. The builds.
Yeah, we skipped the builds.
Let's go to the builds. The microphone is somewhere over here. So if you don't hear us well, we will just try to turn back and scream at the microphones. I believe I will start with this one right here. If you see, we have 3 almost identical cases in the world's most popular case now, the O11D XL. And while people say it's a boring case, if we talk about Matrix 7, I guess we can negate that fact, because with the Matrix 7 this case actually supports very large amounts of diversity.
Yeah, there's just so many different options for it, and the main thing that we like about it and that helps with us is that the distribution plate isn't taking up the space of one of the radiators.
Yeah.
So in the majority of other cases, the distro is mounting either in a fan space or in a radiator space, and then you instantly kill one option, and it's like we've made a distribution plate to support water cooling, but we've prevented the fitment of one radiator, and then it's really hard to move forwards with a product that would keep everyone happy. And again, with the O11 series, that's where the exception is, because we stick to the front side, we don't block the bottom or the top radiator, and with the latest one, we've now deployed the side radiator to full effect.
I think that the cameraman wants to say that you have to step inside the viewing shot somewhere a bit more forward, yeah, but now that you're done with your part, I'm gonna start talking about the builds here. So here we have the O11D XL with the same distro, 3 builds, and here we have a slim radiator at the bottom, we have a slim radiator at the top, and we have a slim radiator in the back. This is a for the win GPU in here with an active backplate cooling. If you could come closer and see, you would see that both front and back sides of the block is lit with RGB. This is obviously in a vertical position. So this is the place where we see how does the new terminal work excellently and allowing you to have both in and out ports from the front side. If you look at the radiator down below, you see that the slim radiator is extended by a 28mm extender, and then you have the angle fitting, and then it screws into the distribution plate. So this is one look that you can achieve. This is obviously a full lit RGB build. Each of the tubes are perfectly parallel and flat, and everything is nice and clean. No bending is required for this PC at all, just cutting straight tubes to length, and that's it. Let's move on to the other build right here. So this is the same case. This one is using a for the win GPU in a horizontal position. This is a non-active backplate cooling version, so a simple block with a backplate. Again, all of the tubes are perfectly flat and level with a set of fittings which is prescribed for this setup. This build also has 3 radiators. You have a P in the bottom, P in the back, and the P at the top. If you look at this, the bottom radiator again, now the P radiator is extended by a 14mm fitting, and then you have the angle, and then it goes inside this distribution plate. This is obviously a less RGB build. If we would install the OS, we would stop the G.Skill RAM cycling over and over. By the way, a huge thanks to G.Skill for helping us with RAM for all of these builds. And then we step one more step right here. One more, should I say, flavor. So in this case, you have an X, which means that you don't need any extenders if you want to join the bottom radiator and the distro plate. This build has only 2 radiators, that doesn't have a radiator and in the back. This is a reference card. Again, everything is nice and parallel, just a angled fitting from the block to the distro plate, and everything's neat without any bending. Here you can also see how does the RGB effect look like on acetal products. And finally, if we step one more step to my right and your left, probably, we can see the build which I built a few weeks back, but we aired it a few days back. So this is the MSI Prospect 700 case, and the motherboard which is inside it is the MSI MPG Z690 Carbon EKX, which is also Matrix 7 compatible. That's why it has the ports in a vertical position, which means that if I wanted to, I could take this motherboard and slam it into any of the other builds behind me, and you would still end up with a perfectly parallel set of tubes, because the ports on the monoblock are at the exact height prescribed by the Matrix 7. This also means that I could put any of the boards inside this build and it would work nice, because the distribution plate inside this board is specifically designed for this case, also supported by Matrix 7. It has a nice MSI EK co-branding, and we will be launching this distribution plate when the case hits the market as well. Radiators also follow the same ideology, so you have a set of extenders. This is a slim radiator which requires a 14 plus a 28 millimeter extender to line up with the distro. If you have a P, you would lose the 14 millimeter extender and just use the 28 to interconnect it. If we look at the bottom, now we can stop talking about Matrix for a few seconds. You can see the 7-inch screen which we will be launching in 2 months or something like that. The screen will be available both in a black frame and a silver frame version. It's a standard HDMI screen powered by 5 volts, which means you can use a USB plug to power it. We will probably also be including a cable which will allow you to power the screen from the internal USB plug, and you will be able to display on it whatever you want, movies, YouTube, hardware info, or whatever is your liking. So I guess that the Matrix 7 presentation with these 3 builds, 4 actually, is helping you to understand what Matrix 7 is all about. So I will shut up now for a brief moment and let Joe maybe talk about the builds as well.
Yep, so one question I saw while I was following you guys was how are the radiators connected, and in these cases all 3 of them have a rotary 90 and then a male rotary extender directly into the distribution plate. It's a little tricky with the standard bracket in the XL to put it together, and we're working to find the best resolution to that before the Reflection 2's debut. We may also use the fittings we showed earlier with the distribution plate that the radiator slides directly inside. For now it's still in progress, but we're easily able to put all 3 of these together, and we'll figure out the best way to bring it to you guys. The ETA for the reflections will be roughly in line with the radiators, like just as the original reflection will be difficult to use with the new radiators, the Reflection 2 is difficult to use without them, so they will come in at roughly the same time, and we anticipate that to be starting at the end of February.
Do we have any questions about Matrix 7 that we need to address at the moment?
Most people liking it. Side-mounted distro plate for the 011 Evo. It's actually compatible with the G1 still for now, but you can expect one day a Matrix 7 solution to come as well for
the so-called G2.
The G2, maybe that's what it will be called.
Maybe. I'm happy that there's no hate for the 011D XL.
Not too much, and I really hope that your grandma enjoys hers. Maybe she'll consider liquid cooling soon.
Yeah, so obviously a approach like this will make custom loop liquid cooling more accessible to people without the fear of okay, what do I need? We will do our best. I mean, our mission is to have so-called prescriptions, so that we will have a list of the extenders that you need, list of the things that you need to assemble a beautiful liquid cooled build with, I say, minimum effort.
Yeah, and it's really, not an attempt to restrict the creativity of anyone. We don't want to hold it back, and then the time you want something to just work out nicely, to know that it will, to know that it would be painless. If you needed to take an easy way out and that you don't get forced with too many nasty situations, is what we're trying to do.
Just like you mentioned the yesterday, I think we have also people who want to build a liquid-cooled PC over the weekend, and that they will build their liquid-cooled PC over the weekend because that's what they wanted to do, and they will build it regardless of the end result.
Yeah, no matter what, the first tube I cut, the first tube I bend, will be the one that goes in, and it's fine.
Yeah.
I've got 2 days, and that's what the end result will be.
Yeah, but now with this,
yeah, it's great that the character who would spend 2 days accept the first result and be happy, but also now, the person who, when they get to their first build, would spend 6 months making every bend perfect, learning to master everything before they move forwards. Well, if you can have both,
yeah,
if you nail it on the first try, and then you have a month to imagine something better.
Yeah, so obviously nailing a straight tube is much easier than like bending the tubes. Enough about Matrix 7. We have mentioned the screen already, but it's later on the list. We will probably get back to it. But now we have micro fittings, right?
Yep.
Micro fittings. So we have shown some of the micro fittings in the keynote presentation, but we haven't shown the fitting itself. So okay, we will use the satin titanium because it's the most contrast on this mouse pad, and we will have a helpful GPU block to help with the demonstration. So you start talking, I will start disassembling them.
So the micro series fittings, you've noticed probably by now, we have a micro extender, a micro plug, and they're just the physically smallest counterpart to the base torque fitting that we can make. So the torque series, when we first released it, was controversially massive, but still over time it's become natural, but there are places where they get blocked, where they don't just fit right in, and for that now we'll make the smallest physically possible type of each fitting that we can. So we had the plug, which we established a diameter of 16.5 millimeters. That's as tiny as you can make a 1/4 inch fitting and still seal with an O-ring. Then we had the extender, and now
it's so small I can't thread it in there. There we go.
Yeah, so as you saw then in the keynote, we now have a 90-degree fitting design done, and also you will see here a compression fitting. It's even smaller than the push-in fitting at an installation height of just 7 millimeters. It's only available for 12 millimeter hard tube because any other tube is too big to fit what we would consider micro as the smallest size. And it has a single O-ring which has just the same grip as our big double O-ring design. So it has a very special shape that there's a big surface area in contact with the tube, and it really holds on. You do, however, need to be very, very precise with how you cut your tube, getting a nice flat finish on the end and not a diagonal cut, because there's really not much headroom inside to play with.
Now that we talked about this micro HDC fitting, we will talk about the angled fitting, which is also quite special and quite smaller than the regular.
Yeah, so the original torque fitting is 23 millimeters diameter. That was the minimum diameter we could make that design to still have a flat surface big enough for the fitting and to still be a clean circle on the outside. 23 was what we landed at for the outside diameter, and now you've seen with the plug we set the standard of 16.5. So packaging everything you need for the fitting, the locking elements, the rotating parts into that was a real challenge, and we also reduced the installation height to the center line as low as physically possible. So now the center line of the tubing was just 12.5 millimeters from the block. That's, any lower and the fitting will be scraping the block, so that's the bottom. and when we reduce the height that much, then there's no surface that you can screw it in with. There's no nulled surface left.
Yeah, like here.
Yep. And so to get around that, we actually have a 6mm hexagon in the top, and the kind of male side of the fitting goes all the way through the female side and sticks out the top, so you can install it, but there's still a big space inside for the coolant to get through.
So as you can see on the inside of the fitting, you can see the male part all the way down, and actually this is the way that you would install the fitting. So you would be using a 6mm Allen key, locking it in, and then you will be able to rotate the top part in the desired direction. And if you pair these two micros together, you see a drastic difference in sizes. Also, the micro is not Matrix 7 compatible, right?
Yeah, controversially, kind of. The micro fitting is one of the only things that will show that's not Matrix 7 compatible today, and that's because if we rounded it up to the nearest 7mm, if we made it fit alongside the full-size torque fitting, then it would no longer be the smallest it could be. Possibly we will make a low-profile big torque, which would serve a different purpose in the same way as we intend to have a 28mm offset when it's needed. The small guys are available in every finish, so nickel, black, satin, and gold now.
So basically we will make every fitting that we produce, we will make it available in all of the finishes that we are carrying. And we are talking about finishes, and we are done with the micro fittings.
Everyone's been asking for gold everything throughout the whole show. I think we need more gold.
When are we gonna make the gold block?
I think we probably should make a gold block.
Okay, we'll make a gold block. Gold case.
Oof.
Talking about finishes, and we need some M.2 SSD heatsinks. So the M.2 SSD heatsink is something that we have produced the first time 4 years ago or something like that, and
maybe slightly older, yeah.
And the product is very popular, and we felt like it's needing a facelift. So we made a facelift, and we plan to make it available in 3 colors, but maybe
gold too.
Maybe gold. The special thing about these heatsinks is that they support single and dual-sided SSDs at the same time. How? It's magic. We won't reveal that just now. We have used clips on the initial M.2 heatsink, but here we are using screws from the side.
Yeah, the Quantum 2 design and the same heatsink pattern that's used on the convection DDC. So these will be released as convection parts, which is probably our name for all of the passive style products we have. And yeah, that nice little snaky guy and the perfect visual to match.
Now that we have covered...
Since that's the last product which we'll take a look at that's finished in silver, I'd like to comment on the difference between silver and satin titanium and why we say they're different on the website, why we say it's different in every product name. So aluminium parts are finished with sandblasting and anodization, and for those we notate that as silver finish, whereas the fittings, which are actually all brass, of course it's not appropriate to use aluminium there, they're finished with a plating that has that appearance. They're visually very hard to tell apart. In a system, when they're not directly on each other, you wouldn't notice, but it's just a case of which material, either brass or aluminium, is suitable for the part as to which finish we can use.
So here we have, this is a brass top, which is then made to be satin titanium. and here we have the backplate, which is aluminum and then sandblasted and anodized. So there's a very very subtle difference. I think that the aluminum is reflecting a little bit onto the yellowish hue, and the satin is more a bit to the blue, colder side, but there's like minimal difference.
Yeah, hard to tell apart, but you know, mechanically we choose the one which is suitable for that product. We can't make brass backplates or brass heat sinks because it's not a good conductor.
We can, but
yeah. Okay, we could, but it would perform worse than the aluminium part.
Teaser time.
So I think now we'll be taking a look at the latest Founders Edition. This is for the 3070 Ti. It's the smallest Founders Edition block and probably the smallest GPU block that we have now. It's pretty tiny.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, if we put it next to the Photo N3.
It is the smallest. I haven't... You mean this one?
Yep.
It's a substantial difference. So this is the 3070 Ti Founders, and it carries all of the design features as the original block as well. It won't come with active backplate cooling, right?
No, there's no need, but it still has the same design backplate as the 3080. But in this case it's made in one single piece, so it's either all black or all silver for the entire outside, and the only other difference mechanically is the terminal from the 3080 and 3090. They all have a 6-port terminal, so you can use them in any way.
So you won't be getting two terminals in the back and then be able to choose between the two of them, but we'll have a single terminal which supports 6 ports. What do we have? The Founders. We can talk about the screen again a bit because that's my list. My list says that we have to talk about the screen. So 7-inch screen, resolution is
600 by 1024 pixels.
Yeah. Will be available in black and silver. I am nagging people and crying about nickel versions as well. It's a bit tricky to nickel plate it. This is how the backside look for now. This is how it looks. This is how it looks. Top down. This is how it looks from the backside. This might change that we add other cable routing options. As you can see, it's a standard HDMI and a micro USB.
That's right. Yeah.
Micro USB where you can power it. It has multiple 105 millimeter spaced screw holes so that you can put it either low, top, or centered on any fan mounting, radiator mounting inside your case. So that's the screen, and the list says that yeah, we can talk about the MSI again a bit. It's on my list, but I obviously talked about it already. The interesting thing about the distribution case and the whole collaboration with MSI is the... Do we have it here, right? Where is it? No, we have moved it. The Z690, the MAG Z690 Torpedo, which is also Matrix 7 compatible, which means that you will be able to be choosing between the higher spec board and the lower spec board. The fun part about the... oh, we have it here. Good then.
We found it.
You found it. Maybe just talk about the block a bit itself and how does it work. So in comparison to monoblocks as we made them so far, each monoblock had a copper part which was the cold plate for the CPU and copper parts which were making contact with the VRM and cooling the VRM. But cooling the VRM on lower spec motherboards actually makes more sense than on the highest end motherboards, which have very efficient VRMs and high quality VRMs. But people still want to cool them, and that's why we are making monoblocks. But on this one, the VRM cooling is actually done in a different way, and this is how we are able to achieve lower cost for the block. And this is why this motherboard retails for $369 US. So it still has a very sophisticated cooling engine, so it's not any old school cold plate that we slapped on here just because it's a lower tier product. So it's using the velocity.
Yep, velocity to Alder Lake specific cooling engine inside with the correct curvature for the LGA 1700 CPUs.
Some internal testing actually showed us that we were able to overclock overclock a 12,900 CPU to 5.6 gigahertz on this motherboard. And this is how it actually looks and works. Never mind the chopped up cable, we were using this for a photo sample, but as you can see, it's using the where do we have it? We have it here. So it's using the same cold plate, the same LJ specific cold plate, but the cooling is done by the stainless steel part of the block touching the heatsink, which is already applied onto the motherboard. So just by placing thermal pads onto the stainless steel part, this block is cooling the VRM as well. And there's a substantial difference between the temperatures of the VRM with and without this block. I'm not going to say any numbers because I will leave that to the reviewers to confirm it. I believe that we will be sending out review samples in a matter of weeks, so you will be able to find out more about this thing.
Yep, and one unusually interesting thing is the performance of the board without our cooling solution in place. So if you wanted to run this with just an AIO temporarily or just an air cooler until you're ready to build the loop, ready to install the block, then there's only a really small performance penalty for the VRM thermals to have this solution implemented. So it really makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense if you want to just test hardware outside of a loop and get to grips with it before building everything. So it's a really nice entry product.
Yep. Do we have anything else left on the list? Or? Oh yeah.
There's one thing left on the list.
Two things actually.
Is there?
This and this.
Yes.
Yeah, we haven't talked about that one. Okay.
But everybody just wants a mouse mat, so maybe we shouldn't bother with those.
No, okay. Bye bye. Mouse mat. This one. This is a sample. This is the Quantum mouse pad with some Quantum-y products on it. Let me just put this like that. We are working on this, and until we are satisfied with the quality of the print, so that you can see all of the nice details about the Quantum products here, we are not releasing it. But this is something that's gonna happen in the future. When? I don't know. I'm not gonna say coming soon because I have no idea about this one. But I agree that it's nice, and yeah, this is something that will happen. Joe also has his own. But before we start wrapping up this show, we have two very interesting things to show you. One is behind me, and I'll ask the very handy side cameraman to point his camera right here, and I'll try to face the microphone to make good sound. So here we have a thing that we for now call a smart monoblock. Just a second. So, a smart monoblock. This is a monoblock with a integrated screen. A lot of the things that we have learned by building some of the most advanced water blocks on the market for motherboards, we are now implementing them in our own products. So this monoblock has a screen in it, it has a flow meter in it, and it has a temperature probe inside it. Obviously now it's just displaying random information just to mimic how it will look when you will have coolant running through it, and also it will be able to read the temperature of it. This is a thicker block than a regular monoblock, but we have made it 7 millimeters higher so that it's Matrix 7 compatible. This one is for the Z690 Maximus Hero. Release time is unknown for now, but we wanted to share and show it with you that this is also something that we are working on, and you can expect this in the near future, I guess. In the near future. And now that we are done with this block here, I guess that Joe will need my help to
Just a little bit more space.
just a little bit. Should we first talk about the one that's not built, and then
Well, now they know.
yeah, but, I mean, they have saw something. They saw something, so let's do that one first.
And we have space for both.
Yeah, let's wait for both. Okay. Five hours later. Want me to move the mat or not? Here it is. So now you just want to hide me. This is a concept case that we are trying to develop. It's a very high-end case. It's a machine from. This is 1 centimeter in the middle, right?
No, it's
More.
finished at 13 millimeters.
So let's start by this. So this is a case which is assembled from the 3 main parts, which is the center plate, which holds the motherboard, the front and the back plate, and then you have one more plate which is just the cover at the back. But it's a nice piece. Let's just show it. Okay, so this is the back side. You already get the idea that this will support 360 millimeter radiators if cooling power is needed. And the middle plate is 13, right? And
Yep. The middle plate is 13, the end plates are 8, and all the other panels are 4 millimeters thick. Absolutely every part of it besides the glass panel is machined from billet aluminium. There are not even any kind of cut parts, they're all machined to the same standard as kind of magnitude Founders Edition parts.
Yep.
Really heavily built.
and in the front, it's a distro plate.
Yep, and this is also the first case and the first distro plate to have the fittings which push directly inside. So the radiators just slide inside.
Let me try to show that somehow. I guess we will be able to do it with that camera. Ooh, top down action. Top down action as well. It's a long thread.
It's secure.
It's secure indeed. Actually, these thumb nuts are the same size as the micro plugs, right?
Yeah, the Torque Micro pattern knurling and finishing on the thumb nuts.
Is someone buying in the comments? When can I buy this?
Ben wants to sneak one away to AMD.
Okay.
A few people are refinancing their house.
Selling the cars.
Yeah. Eagle's not going to pay tax this year.
It's a very tight fit on this one, but I can still get it up, right?
Yeah, this is the first sample that we have. These two. We had one finished in silver and one finished in black Elox anodization. They're still quite tightly fitted. I think I was in water block mode when tolerancing everything, and it's a bit tight for a case.
Wait.
But it's in progress. There you can see on the distribution plate, those 6 holes don't have any threads. That's because the fittings are supplied for the radiator and they push directly inside.
Where is it?
But they were on the radiator.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm not going to slide this one in because it will have a... But you have to slide it in before you assemble the case, right?
But they slide in on a 90-degree fitting because
okay.
I made space.
Yeah.
I made space for the S in case you must have more fan space.
So these push-ins just slide into these holes. That's it. Let's put. We can talk about the GPU mounting as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
You need to step in a bit.
Okay, so you can see down here where the GPU mounts, because the motherboard is flush on the back of the case. The screws for the GPU would actually be inside the panel. This is an unusual case problem because normally you just have a 1mm panel and not 8mm machine sheet. So this additional plate screws inside and clamps with very delicate little shapes around your PCIe slot. There's 2 slots completely open and a 3rd slot that that won't get left open because the plate would be covered by the case itself. We can flip it around and see
the most sexy.
Yep, the most overkill cable management for quite some time.
And also vertical GPU holder ever made. It's
yeah. So I think the vertical GPU bracket's like 20mm thick, and there's another brace on the back which can be removed if you have a Flex ATX size motherboard like the TRX 40 Extreme. So you can take out the little brace, and the motherboard comes behind the bracket. Obviously, this is the first case fully to support Matrix 7, and every single placement of every single part inside it is at 7mm intervals. So its inbuilt distribution plate lines up perfectly with everything. The GPU bracket that's inside the case is also placed in accordance with standard, as if it were in a full system. Yeah, lots and lots of machining.
Lots and lots of machining. So obviously this will be a premium case, similar like the 909. If it happens, if you like it, now is the time that you express your wishes that you like it, because the 909 EK sold out.
Yeah. Yep.
And the funny thing is that we are still seeing them being resold on eBay for double the value of the original cost. So obviously there's a market for super premium cases on the market. This will be one of those, and hopefully we can really bring it to the market.
A few people were asking about the airflow to the radiators. So the radiator array is 3 360s. You can choose between the new S or the new P model. With the P model, you will have around 20mm of clearance between the fans and the backplate, and an extra 14mm with the S model. Considering it's completely open, the base and the top are open, it's adequate for airflow to the central radiator.
Cool. Anything else before we wrap up? Do we still have people watching?
Of course. Only one GPU. So unlike the 909, which was sort of conceived in the era of multiple GPU gaming systems, where people were still skeptical about using vertical GPUs. In this case, we chose kind of to fully embrace that it's only one GPU, but it's compatible with every active backplate that we will have, every design of GPU, every length, every size. So it's as compact as it could be, with massive radiator support, while still not throwing away space, but it's really not a multiple card size build at the end of it. In this build we have Maximus Z690 Apex 12900K with a Velocity 2, LGA 1700 of course, and a 3080 for the Win 3. The blocks fitted with the active backplate and everything linked up nicely with Matrix 7. The GPU power cables are coming soon because this was finished moments before the show started. And yeah.
And the RAM is supplied by G-Skill.
Yeah, Trident Z5 DRGB RAM. All of the cabling is of course very specific to the case and custom made in the early hours of the morning.
Flip the black one.
Flip it which way?
I guess they wanted to see the back side.
Maybe you can see on the
Is there going to be a front panel for the case? That's the front panel of the case. Oh, we have flipped.
Maybe you can see from above what they were thinking.
Yeah. So that's with the P, and you're still left with one fan thickness of space. Also, these are the old Vardar fans, but if we will be having the fans that we just showed you with the cabling will be much more faster and easier, because you won't have to connect. It's like each fan has two cables.
I just cut them all off. Each fan now has two wires in this build.
now, but if you would do a regular build with regular fans, you would left up with
18 wires to
18
bring
wires,
together and wrap up.
Yeah.
Yep.
Much like us. How much for the GPU? Go Lost England. Are the radiators daisy chain? No, the radiators go inside the distro plate and then they are in series, right?
Yeah, so that there are 6 ports in the distro plate and all 3 radiators in series.
Okay, so the work of art. Please tell about the mats. The mats coming soon. I guess it's slowly time to end this live stream, and thank everyone for joining. And we will check some of the questions here and try to answer them later. You can also comment on this video later and ask questions. You can also reach out to our support directly if you have questions about any upcoming products. We will make sure to do more content on Matrix 7 and how does it work. I guess the final and main debut of the Matrix 7 is somewhere around February, when we will have the radiators and the distro plates available, because without them Matrix 7 is not functioning. So you can already gear up with some CPUs and GPU blocks, and then later when the distros and the radiators arrive, you will be able to build an effortless, awesome liquid cooled PC. Any final words, Joe, for this live stream?
No, thank you for joining us, and you can expect some detailed looks at all of the builds and a recap of the thoughts of how they went together, and short videos from all of those in the coming weeks. I think they're all worth checking out, especially when this one is completely finished. So hope to see you all soon, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for joining, take care, and we'll be in touch.